Welcome to the Dr. Mudgil podcast. This is episode 69. We are flying through these podcasts. It is the middle of March here, literally the middle of March, and the Ides of March, as those versed in Shakespeare would say. We survived a nor'easter here in New York. Actually, New York City area was relatively spared. We just got some rain and some wind. But folks not too far north of us just got slammed with like a foot, nearly 2 feet of snow in some areas. But fortunately, we were spared. The older I get, the less I like the snow. So anyways, on to the podcast. So this podcast is going to be a hashtag Ask Dr. Mudgil form of podcast. We had a great question in from Reddit about tattoo aftercare, and I thought this would be a great time to talk about it. So let me read you the question. We'll show you the picture as well. Question is, got my tattoo retouched on Sunday and used Saniderm. I took the bandage off yesterday. The tattoo looks a little red and has some minor little bumps on it. I'm thinking I might have gotten sweat under the bandage. Is this infected, allergy, or just irritation? And there's a picture which we will show you guys. And that's a really good question. So we talk a little bit about tattoos, and then we're going to just talk about various tattoo reactions, and I'll come back and answer this question. So tattoos are... I didn't even realize how prevalent they are, but they're extraordinarily prevalent in adults in the United States. So these are, they're prevalent around the world, but these are the United States statistics. 30-ish%, maybe a little over 30% of adults have tattoos. I thought that was a pretty big number, which means there are about 260 million adults in the United States. There are 330 million people in the United States, but a lot of those are folks under 18. So of those adults, about 80 million people have tattoos. So with 80 million people having tattoos, and that number is actually increasing. I think the number from like 2012, these numbers are from 2019 to 2019, have like every year has seen a pretty significant increase in the number of tattoos. And tattoos, I see them in my patients all the time, folks young and old. They're very, very prevalent. They're very beautiful. I have to be a big fan of tattoos, especially the artists. Some of the artists that create these tattoos are just like out of this world. Some of the tattoo art out there is just some of the best art you will see, in my personal opinion. But that being said, with that number of people getting tattoos, there's a huge number of potential reactions to tattoos. So let me just kind of walk you through like what's normal and what's abnormal first. So when you get a tattoo, pigment is being placed into the dermis, which is the layer of skin just below the outer layer of your skin. And that's where your collagen lives, your blood vessels are, there are inflammatory cells there. And a tattoo by nature is a traumatic process to the skin. You're basically inserting foreign material into the skin in a traumatic way using a needle. And, literally it's like thousands and thousands and thousands of punctures with the needle to deliver tattoo pigment. So what's normal and what could be expected in anyone who's getting a tattoo is some redness, some tenderness in the first couple of days. If you touch it, it might feel a little bit tender. The skin around the tattoo might be a little bit irritated and inflamed, which is all normal stuff. Generally, that resolves, that tenderness resolves in a couple of days. And then, a few days after that, you might notice some scaling of your skin as it recovers. And for most folks, by like day 7, everything is basically normal. And certainly by 2 weeks out, day 14, things by and large are completely back to normal with no scaliness and certainly no like irritation or redness or that sort of thing. Now, in some individuals, you can have a more serious reaction. By serious, I don't mean like life-threatening serious, but things that can happen, and these are very rare, but sometimes you can get an infection from getting your tattoo. So if there's bacteria on the surface of your skin and the skin isn't adequately cleaned before, or if somehow bacteria penetrate the little wound, microscopic wound that's created by the tattoo needle, it's possible to get a superficial skin infection. You can either get something called an impetigo, which is very superficial, or a cellulitis, which is a little bit deeper, very rare. And that would really be like prolonged redness and tenderness that's sort of beyond the scope of what you would anticipate having when you get a tattoo. And obviously, if something like that were to happen, it's imperative that you go see your doctor, preferably a dermatologist, so they can evaluate the area and put you on whatever treatment may be required to kind of get you through the hump. Allergy to tattoo ink is actually pretty rare, believe it or not. And certain colors are more prone to create allergic reactions, like reds, yellows, that sort of stuff. Are typically more allergenic than the black tattoos, which is the most frequent color that's used. Those, believe it or not, typically manifest a little while out from getting your tattoo. So generally it's like a a couple of weeks, you'll start noticing changes related to allergy. And those could either be like very superficial changes where there's just some scaliness and itchiness around the tattoo. Or sometimes you could get what are called granulomas, which is like a more intense inflammatory reaction where you can get some bumps that form in the tattoo. And that's very rare. Like in my, 20-year career, I've probably seen that twice, maybe 3 times. And generally those are very manageable with, various treatments, again, employed by your dermatologist. So that's kind of like the general scope of what happens when you get a tattoo. In your case, in this specific question that's been asked, most likely, now listen, I can't say any of this with 100% certainty, as I always say, like, I'm just looking at a picture. It's like, one, second in time, without properly examining you and evaluating the site. It's impossible for me to say with surety. But what I can say is that I highly suspect that you're actually allergic to the adhesive in the Saniderm. So the Saniderm is basically like a polyurethane acrylic adhesive that's applied to a tattoo. And some folks leave that on for a day. Some folks leave it on just for a few hours. But the adhesive in folks, particularly folks who've been exposed to the adhesive multiple times, your body generally doesn't love it. So I don't know how many of you out there have seen this, but I see it all the time in my office where folks have a surgical procedure done and they have a Band-Aid on, and then they change the Band-Aid every day for a couple of weeks until we take the stitches out. By the end of that 2-week period, like a lot of folks get an allergic reaction just like right around where the adhesive is in the Band-Aid, and it's almost like these 2 geometric squares where the Band-Aid adhesive is, and then there's an area that's spared in the middle, which is where that little that foam pad is on most Band-Aids. So it's very, very common to have an allergic to adhesive, either in a Band-Aid or, in your case, the Saniderm. It looks like, just looking at you, it looks like you probably have more than one tattoo, particularly since your tattoo was getting retouched. So what I suspect is you've been exposed to Saniderm multiple times, depending on how long it took to do that. Looks like a pretty extensive tattoo that you have, and I don't know if you have tattoos elsewhere on your body, but you're probably slowly developing a sensitivity, or were slowly developing a sensitivity to the adhesive in Saniderm, and it finally reached a certain threshold where your body said, you know what, boom, I don't like this anymore, and I'm going to start creating a reaction to it, which is what I think you are seeing. Fortunately, it's very, very easily treated, so you should get it. If it's still, I don't know when you posted this, but I suspect it's probably resolved by now, but if it hasn't or if it's gotten worse, you should get it to see your local board-certified dermatologist who could give you some cream, which will basically knock that out. So I hope that answers your question. Most folks that get tattoos, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of folks, have absolutely no reaction at all to their tattoos, especially if you go to a reputable tattoo parlor, somewhere where the folks are very attentive to delivering tattoos in a as clean of a way possible. They go over aftercare with you. You're given instructions on how to care for your tattoos, which just brings me to my one last point. So for most folks that get tattoos, my general recommendation is using a viscous, like Vaseline-based emollient for a few days. So either like Vaseline or Aquaphor for like 3, 4, 5 days, and applying it multiple times a day. After which, and that's generally when you start to notice some scaling around like day 3 to 5. Once that happens, then you can switch to just a regular emollient, something that's cream-based. There's millions of them out there. But then I would apply that twice a day for a few days until your skin basically just feels, quote unquote, normal again. But that's pretty much all I have to say about tattoos and tattoo aftercare. I hope all of you out there have a wonderful, restful weekend, and we will catch up next week. Let's get it.